It's the ESCtips.com Eurovision Preview Podcast. Join us as we sort this year's contenders from the duds.
Attention, you are now entering a fanboy-free zone.
Hello and welcome to the second ESC Tips Eurovision 2018 Preview Podcast. Today I will be discussing semi-final 2 with two new guests. Well, that's not strictly true. One was a last-minute stand-in a few years ago, representing Cyprus, but actually in London at the moment. It's Panos Zannettos. Kalimera, Panos.
Kalimera, Gavin. Good morning.
Good
nice
morning.
to be here.
How's your Eurovision 2018 going so far?
Well, it's going pretty well. For me and my personal taste, it's a strong year, so I'm looking forward to the rehearsals. They won't bore me.
Yeah, I think Semi 2 is definitely the least favourite semi for rehearsals, but in fairness, the back end of Semi 1 isn't looking too good. I think there's going to be lots of toilet trips.
Very front-loaded semis.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we've been doing podcasts since 2014, and we now welcome our first female guest. All the way from Sydney, Australia, it's co-owner of ESCinsight, Sharleen Wright. G'day.
Thank you, Gavin. Yes, g'day.
You're having a year off travelling to Eurovision this year, so how will you be watching the show?
It's going to be a very early morning for me. It's going to be tea, toast, probably the heater on, hopefully, if it gets a little bit colder here, some blankets, a pillow, a bit of sleeping, yeah, and a lot of Eurovision.
So they do like a late in the day rerun in Australia?
Well, it airs here live at 5 a.m. on the actual day, and then what they do is they do a rerun over the actual weekend of Eurovision. So they have primetime viewings at 7:30 at night. So they do semi-final 1 on the Friday, semi-final 2 on Saturday, and then obviously the big final on the Sunday.
And is there much hype over there this time around?
There's a lot of hype, and obviously particularly for our own act. So we're seeing a lot of headlines for Jessica Malboy over here, and certainly gearing up for a big year that we hope for really, really good results.
And is that hype that is it a much bigger level of hype compared to last year?
Absolutely. I think this is actually peak hype for Australia. I certainly haven't heard any sort of discourse prior to this of an actual potential winner. So Jess going into this, they're really talking about her as bringing home the award and obviously a potential hosting, but then you need to educate Australians, we won't be hosting here.
Such a shame. All those Spanish fans that we could leave behind in Europe and hold it in the peaceful sanctity that is Australia. Anyway, right, let's get on with the show. We are going to be discussing the high points and low points of semi-final 2, along with any potential shocks. Our guests will then be asked to pick 3 Eurovision winners. The running order is Norway, Romania, Serbia, San Marino, Denmark, Russia, Moldova, Netherlands, Australia, Georgia, Poland, Malta, Hungary, Latvia, Sweden, Montenegro, Slovenia and Ukraine. So starting with the highs and lows of Semi 2, over to Sharleen. What are your thoughts?
Look, I'm going to say that first half of the semi, as you've said, is quite heavy loaded, like the first semi. But when I say heavy loaded, I think in terms of lowlights, you've got from that position 2 to position 6 as a bit of a nightmare, really. It's lacking a lot of energy and a lot of emotion that would obviously drive a lot of the average viewers to keep watching. But I think that for a lot of people, it's going to be the cup of tea, the loo break, or at very worst, it could be a bit of channel surfing. So, yeah, the Romania, Serbia, San Marino, Denmark, Russia is like a big black hole for me. And particularly when I look at that lineup, I think, Russia in itself is an improvement on the non-entry that we obviously had from Yulia last year, but we've obviously have now seen a live performance of that song. Whether or not it was hampered by any sound or issues or anything like that, but I think we can safely say that her vocal ability and the diction is just not there. It's a big problem for her. But as sad as it is, I just can't discount Russia from obviously getting through and qualifying. And then obviously we've got a real low light in the case of San Marino as well. I just don't know what to say that's really positive about that song.
I was confused watching it on the Israel Calling show last night. There was terrible streaming issues with the Israel Calling, and I just prayed it came on during San Marino's song. But the low lights for me is exactly what you've picked out. It's song 3 through to Russia. Moldova is sort of the reset button.
Absolutely.
And then the quality sort of picks up. There's another little dip when you get to Georgia, but that's not a bad dip. It's just that it's not particularly relatable to the rest of Europe. Poland picks up the energy. Malta's not totally out of it. Hungary is a bit of a quick, let's go and make a cup of tea or put the TV on mute. And then Latvia serves up Sweden. Montenegro, typical Balkan ballad. And then it ends on Ukraine. And people aren't that excited about Ukraine, but it could easily finish, top 3, certainly top 4 in this semi, with the sort of support, especially if Russia doesn't get as much support. Let's bring in Panos now. What are your thoughts on this semi?
Well, I wish I could have something edgy to add, but I'm pretty much in line with you guys. I think it's very front-loaded, and it's a weaker semi than the first semi, so it's easier to identify the high points. And I think the producers deciding the running order very, very correctly use Melody Festival and kind of thing in the first part by putting the one of the highlights, Alexander Rybak, first, and then you have the big deep you guys talked about, and then the highs of Moldova, Netherlands, and Australia at the end. And the second part, as you said, is not as bad as that run of songs at the start, but still, in terms of competing, and even in terms of top 10, I could actually see only Sweden from the whole of the second part making the top 10 in the final eventually. It's more lows rather than highs this semi-final. But I would like to say that I noticed that in your run of bad songs in the first half, you didn't include Romania in it, and I kind of agree, even though I wasn't too positive in relation to the song when it was selected. I think that is at least decent enough to continue Romania's string of good results of qualifying at least.
I found, having watched Israel Calling last night, I was less impressed with the Romanian song than I have been since it was selected. I've always been quite positive about it, but I've still recognised its weaknesses in the Eurovision context. But yeah, last night it took a bit of a dive for me. But it wasn't the Eurovision stage, so it's difficult to judge it totally.
And I think it has a nice contrast as well to Norway, which is before it. Plus, the things that come after it are so atrocious that it seems good compared to them.
Actually, just another point on Romania. In the national final, they had those sort of ski masks on. It looked like I was watching Friday the 13th. I've seen a sort of rehearsal video since then where they're practicing choreography, and it looks as if they are rehearsing something similar. Now, they weren't wearing ski masks in that, which is encouraging, but I think this band just need to sit at their instruments and do what a normal band should do rather than prancing around with choreography.
Well, my biggest worry with Romania is I think it is a really competent rock tune. It's got sort of that 80s soft rock feel to it, but it's ultimately forgettable in nature, and being in that second position also reinforces to me that that's how it's been programmed. It's forgettable in nature, just chuck it on early, don't worry about it, particularly when it comes straight after Norway, when you've got so much narrative going on there with Alexander Rybak and sort of the 1500 song and him opening and being a returning artist. He is really going to suck all the energy for himself, leave nothing for Romania.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. If I was Krista, I would potentially have shoved Russia in that number 2. I know politically it wouldn't go down so well, but after last year's antics, I think it was fully deserved. Are there any other low points for you guys before we move on?
No particular low points, but I guess on my highlights, I have to point out my own home country here. I just think that Jess being on in that last position, sort of the first half. Obviously, she's done everything right. The delegation are doing everything right in terms of the competition, and it's been noticed that she's a potential major contender here, being put in that position. So I think with that run, that lineup, it's going to make her shine even more. And obviously, as I said, Norway is a big highlight for me.
Yeah, there's two in that front half that really have star quality. Whereas for me, Sweden, Benjamin Ingrosso's, it's almost as if his staging is better than him. Even though he's a competent performer, Jessica Mauboy and Alexander Rybak, they just come across as more relatable, easy for the audience to like. Whereas the staging sort of takes over for Sweden. Does that chime with you, Panos?
Yes and no. I can understand where you're coming from, but I do feel that Benjamin Ingrosso is a very charismatic performer and very votable and relatable, and actually much more so than last year's Robin. And he managed to take an even a kind of dated song to the top 5. So I do think these three are the ones that really stand out in terms of both song and performer star quality. Norway, Sweden, and Australia. They're head and heels above everyone else here.
Okay, right. Now it's time to flag up any shock non-qualifiers or indeed qualifiers. Panos, who's on your list?
Controversially perhaps, I have Denmark on my list of non-qualifiers. The fandom seems to really love it, and I can understand why. I mean, I don't mind it myself. I will probably not skip it when it comes on my phone. But at the end of the day, it's very 90s. It's dated, and maybe that's why fans like it. It has that Nordic ethnic vibe, maybe a bit like Nina Kralij's Lighthouse had, but this is more, the Viking version of that. And fans like this nostalgic sound, and as I said, I don't mind it myself either. But we have to recognize that it's very dated. It's sung in a not very potable way, not very charming way.
It's very dark.
Very dark, and it comes at a point in the running order where it's a bit, it's drowned. The Vikings are getting drowned. It's being followed by what will very possibly be, 4 qualifiers in a row and strongest songs of the semi and some of the strongest songs of the core competition, and it's right at the start of that. It doesn't feel like it stands out, and it feels like the kind of thing that juries will mark down. Actually, the melody reminds me of I don't know if you remember the song of Switzerland 2013, where
it's the Salvation Army group.
Yes, it's basically that kind of anthemic, dated thingy, but this is more, with a more Viking instrumentation, and the juries really hated that. Had it really low. So I don't know. I'm not very optimistic of its chances.
And it's worth pointing out that we've already seen peak Denmark, whereas we've only seen a bad Russia, and Russia is more likely to overachieve, and Denmark is more likely to underachieve.
I agree 100%.
Sharleen, what are the shocks for you?
I would absolutely agree with Denmark. I think it's got a very strong visual aspect to it, but ultimately it's so dark, it's so moody, it does feel quite dated. And when you're talking about Scandi votes, you've got really huge songs in regards to Norway and Sweden. I think they're going to suck up all of those votes. There's going to be nothing left for Denmark in regards to their region. In terms of the qualifiers, or non-qualifiers, I should say, I really do feel that we'll lose Romania. I think that's one of the ones that we're going to lose. It's obviously got a really long qualification record, and I think it's going to fall on Thursday night. I think it's just going to be forgettable, and we're going to lose that song.
So do you have the Russia through to Australia all qualifying?
I do.
Yep.
But yeah, I obviously my heart says let's lose Russia. My head says Romania's going to go.
I think that is absolutely the give. It's the Romania or Russia. And the thing is, if Russia does have a really bad night, it's going to be a diaspora-heavy country that takes its place, rather than maybe something like Denmark just sneaking in.
Absolutely.
To be honest, I wouldn't be too shocked if both made it and Denmark stayed out. And the two semis are uncharacteristically front-loaded. So, I could have 6 passing from the first part. I mean, the rules are there to be broken, and they just exceptions confirm the rule.
Yep. You can never totally rule it out. Is there any hope for Hungary for you guys?
It's a tough one to call, I think. With Hungary, I know that the band has quite a fan base, as well as you've got some diaspora playing in there. For me, it's a bit too harsh. I find the song a bit too aggressive to listen to all the way through. But I can see its merits. I think it's a more accessible rock song, but I do think that there are better rock songs in this semi-final.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Netherlands is certainly more likeable as a rock song. I think the acceptable way to do rock is how Cyprus did it a couple of years ago. You've got to have the pop rock appeal. It's got to be able to get through a melody festival and heat if it is to do well at Eurovision.
But at the same time, that whatever rock band that comes forward has to be genuine to itself. It can't just go, I'm going to Eurovision and I'm doing a pop version of my rock song. It has to be genuine. And obviously, kudos to Hungary. I think AWS have done that. So well done to them, and we'll see how they end up.
Yeah, I do agree with that. About being genuine to yourself, as you said. I actually prefer them doing what they're doing rather than being, minus one with their pop melange. And actually, when the song came out, I still don't like it. It's not my thing. But it's important, as you say, to separate personal tastes from what will actually happen. But now, in the context of where it's placed, I actually think it makes it, even though I don't like it, because I think songs like these are based on impact, which it has, and also the fact that it's in Hungarian and it's not. They haven't made it more pop than what they really represent. Gives them some credibility with the juries. Like, obviously it's not going to be too high with the juries, but I don't expect them to bury it. So actually, from where it stands there, especially amongst the two very bland entries by Malta and Latvia, and in probably the weakest part of any semi-final, I think it could actually make it, even though I don't like it.
Yeah, I think the USP certainly helps it for sure. That is effectively semi-final 2, unless anyone has something crucial they want to add.
No, not really.
No, I think there's a lot of comments that could have been made on semi-final 1, yes.
So there you have it. That's semi-final 2. It's time to provide 3 potential winning countries. Over to Sharleen. Who are your 3 potential contenders?
Well, it's not going to sound too unusual for me to say Australia, but I'll give a little bit of perspective here. I've never actually thought of Australia as a winner ever, and that includes obviously 2016 with Dami, and I think the delegation as well have never really pushed particularly for a win until this year. So I do have that feeling that Sony are behind it as the record company, the delegation are behind it, the broadcasters behind it, and obviously Jess herself. And they're really following up, obviously, with the promotion. They have plans in place for her after the contest for album release and the like. So they're really working towards this, and the fact that Jess is going for it at this point in her career, I know that a lot of the Eurovision fans probably only perceive her on what she did in 2014 as the interval act. She can sing. This girl can really sing, and we've seen this in Australia, and obviously something that the Europeans are going to learn very, very quickly, and obviously with the preview parties as well, she's really delivering. She has a more up-tempo number that suits her. It suits her style. It suits her range. And I just think that she's going to really take this song and elevate it to something really, really special live. I can't see her falling out of the top 3. The only thing I struggle with Jess is the Eastern vote. and much for the same reason as I thought Dami would struggle with the Eastern vote when she ran as well. So I have a great hope for Australia. In terms of other entries that I think could potentially win, I'm going to also put it out there for Norway. And I'm going to say the reason why I think Alexander Rybak has a chance is not necessarily to do with his song. His song is clearly, it's not fairy tale. It is very different from fairy tale, and it's not as strong an entry, but he has so much narrative and media that will propel him when it comes to Eurovision. And when he goes on stage, he's really charismatic. He really sells the performance. I don't think that the song itself, being really simplistic in lyrics, is going to hurt his chances. I think it's going to help his chances, particularly in those Eastern European nations where he already has a fan base, mind you. But the fact that he's kept it simplistic and he keeps the staging genuine and it reflects, obviously, the lyrics of the song, I think is also going to help his chances. And I certainly don't regret taking a bet on him this year. I took one at 75-1, and I think it's definitely going to serve me well, even if it means a trade on the day, but I think he could do it. And then my third choice is probably, I would say, actually, it's the only country that I can close my eyes and genuinely see the credits rolling over. It's been something that I've been dreaming about for the last week. Obviously, as Eurovision gets closer, it becomes more on my mind. But I think France are in with a really good chance, because I think it's contemporary, it's a genuine performance, it's telling a story, it to me is the closest to the last two winners. It really does feel like it's newsworthy. It's something that the media can capture, and they can really gather some attention for themselves. And I think that the lead singer, Amelie, she can really emote it well, so it transcends that language barrier as well. So I think they've got a really good chance of potentially being there as up at the top on that Saturday night.
Okay, but that's Charlene's three. Now for Panos's.
A couple of them are similar. I do think Australia is looking very strong for the win. I agree with everything Sharleen said. The song is very strong. I mean, I know there's lots of people who say that it's generic pop, but I hate that. I think that there's good songs within each genre. A song doesn't have to be groundbreaking to be good, and this within its genre is really, really strong. As even from the first listen, I was like blown away. I knew immediately that this was going to be very strong. And she's very likable. She walks on a very fine line between a star and a charming girl next door. I think it has really a lot going for it. So that's one for me. The other one, I thought it was going to be my controversial pick, but Sharleen also picked it. France. I think it has a very, very beautiful melody, and also in a year of where most of the contenders are upbeat, it actually provides a nice mellow feel. She's very good both vocally and in terms of transmitting emotion. They just need, I suppose the lack of abilities that it's bad for them, but they just need to find a way to translate the emotion and the message of the song, and I think it will do very, very well.
The news from Israel Calling is that amongst the crew and the people involved with Israel Calling, France was the most well received last night.
Yeah, that's great. It's a really good song. And my third pick would be Czech Republic. Actually, I think it's a very modern song that everyday people will like. It's very chart-worthy. It's doing very well everywhere, in every type of jury indicator, even in things like the OGAE vote, where you might have expected it to be doing less well. And I think he's a very charismatic performer, and it has that kind of sound. If Australia has that constraint of whether it will do well in the East, I think this sound that he has does well both West and East, and Czech Republic is very nicely seated between, West Europe and East Europe, and I think it will get points from everywhere. So he could be even a default winner, let's say, if there's differences in the splits, jury televoting splits of the other contenders.
Yeah, I'd definitely go with you on that one. So there are our 3 potential winners. That's it from us until our final Eurovision 2018 podcast next week, which will feature the automatic qualifiers. We have 2 more guests lined up for that. A huge thank you to our guests today. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Sharleen, you can go and have dinner. Panos, you and I can have breakfast. Until next week, goodbye.
ESCtips.com will return with another show soon. In the meantime, show us some love by following us and sharing this podcast with your Facebook and Twitter friends.